I met a wonderful man in prison. What was that prison I went to? San Quentin, thank you. I went to San Quentin, and I went to talk to a group of guys that were lifers. Some of them had multiple life sentences, so you can imagine what they did to get there, right? So most of these were men that were going to spend the rest of their lives in prison. And they were of all ages, but a shocking number of them were in their 20s and 30s. You imagine being in your 20s and 30s and knowing you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison till the day you take your last breath? And I went in and talked to these guys, and the first time I went to talk to them, I noticed this one guy, probably in his late 40s, and he had a shine to him. I mean, he was glowing. And I talked with the inmates. We did what we're doing here, right? And it was amazing when you, as I always find, is when you talk to people and give them credit for being who they really are and talk to who they really are, it's amazing what starts to come out of them. And after a while, we do this, and this guy that I had noticed, he raises his hand, and he stands up. Nobody else had stood up. And he stands up. And he says, the first thing I want to tell you is I love everything and everybody. And he pointed his hand to this room of about 40 inmates. And there's nothing that any of you can do to stop my love. Nothing. And he said, some of you have really tried, but there's nothing you can do. Right? And he told me a story about he was one of the really, really troublesome prisoner. And so he was getting put down in solitary confinement quite often, for weeks or months at a time. And usually happens because you've shown some kind of violence in prison. And one of the times he got thrown down into the solitary confinement, and at that prison, solitary confinement is not pretty. It's not pretty anywhere, but it's really not pretty there. And no windows, no sunshine, no nothing. And you're in there all alone, 23 and a half hours a day, and for months. And he says, you know, I'd spent my whole life being an angry, rageful man. And I'd blamed everything on everybody. And he said, and I had damn good reason to blame everybody. And he says, I sat there in that solitary confinement one time, and all of a sudden, the walls became like a mirror. And I was just, everything was being reflected back on me. And he said, all of a sudden, my whole life just started to replay over those weeks and days and months in solitary confinement. And he said, you know what I found? He said, I found out that nobody was to blame for me being here. Even though people would treat me unkind, cruelly, violently, I've had some of the worst things happen to me that any of you could imagine, and I realized nobody was to blame for me being here. And then he said, when I realized that, everything got real quiet. And he says, all of a sudden, from that quietness, there was this little pinprick of light right in my chest. And so I looked at it, and I felt it. And he says, it just started to glow and got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, until he says it covered everything in existence. It covered every person who'd ever done anything harmful to me. He said it covered all the people I did harm to. It covered me. It covered everything in existence. And he said, and then I realized that's what I am. And he says, you know what? That's the one thing prison can't take away from me. And then he said this last thing. He says, I'm more free now in prison than I ever was outside. Because I know most people outside don't have the love in their heart that I have inside. Beautiful story, huh? And then to end it all up, he did his little finger pointing again to all these guys, and he said, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So, people say, how do I go out and live this? Well, just imagine he's in a prison. He's with hardened criminals the rest of his life. How does he go live it in that prison where he might get knifed any day or killed any day? Someone may attack him just because he's a radiant, beaming expression of the divine doesn't mean many of the other guys are going to even notice it or care about it. Just imagine that. And it wasn't getting in his way. It wasn't getting in his way. So why would it get in any of our ways? It was really amazing. And you see, I was always sort of thankful that the tradition I trained in Zen, we have our saints in that tradition, great masters that were great saints. We have some of the greatest revered masters of the whole tradition were also, some of them came from a background of murderers, thieves. They weren't all good, great. They weren't born under the North Star, all of them. Some of them come from some very disreputable backgrounds. And there's something, I always thought there's something beautiful in that it shows that nothing is excluded. The only thing that excludes you is you. Reality or God doesn't exclude you. And I always found great comfort in that, Great comfort in that. There was some very charismatic teachers of the past and some very, very ordinary teachers of the past, and everything you can imagine, these great beings.